Okay, real quick before getting started, I have to do an addendum to this Matthew Perry video up on your screen because a commenter made me aware of the fact that the very first QAnon post was made on October 28th, 2017. And as I went into in the Matthew Perry video and all the coincidences surrounding his death, Matthew Perry actually died on October 28th, 2023. Which is truly unbelievable, and I can't believe that I glossed over that. But as I went back looking to verify that information, I noticed that pretty much none of the news articles ever gave the specific date when they referred to that. They always just said it was October of 2017. And it wasn't until I finally dug a little deeper that I was able to verify the date being October 28, 2017. And I have that down here in bold, specifically stating that the very first QAnon post by that user was in a Calm Before the Storm 4chan thread on 10/28/17. And then after that thread, the user behind that account went on to start posting on their own on 4chan, and then later it moved to 8chan, and then there's a whole story behind what happened with it. But yes, indeed, it started on October 28th, 2017 on 4chan. So in the context of the ritual surrounding Matthew Perry's death, this is very important information, given what I went into in that video about Chandler Bing's birthday being April 8th, 1968, and how 1968 is connected into 9/11, and April 8th obviously is the same date as the upcoming eclipse in April of 2024. And given how tied in 9/11 is to these two eclipses through Donald Trump, the Moonchild personification of the 9/11 ritual, we have the thing that would become domestic terrorism known as QAnon and Donald Trump's association with it starting on the same date that Matthew Perry would later die on under very suspicious circumstances, given what was posted on his Instagram account, especially in the context of the Great American Eclipse, or the ritual destruction of the United States of America. Elon Musk put out the following tweet: "This administration is both importing voters and creating a national security threat from unvetted illegal immigrants. It is highly probable that the groundwork is being laid for something far worse than 9/11, just a matter of time." Obviously, we know that Elon Musk is one of them. He's just playing his role in this whole theater production. And I've gone into how that is associated with these two eclipses in terms of how he renamed Twitter to X, and is largely considered a right-wing domestic terrorist version of Twitter now. So he's playing his role as it relates to that part of the narrative. And the dupes who don't know any better somehow think he is on their side or something along those lines. In any event, I'm less concerned with the illegal immigration thing that he's getting into here. I'm more just paying attention to the fact that he actually said the phrase, "the groundwork is being laid for something far worse than 9/11, just a matter of time." And I'll get into the timing of this in the context of everything else that I'm going to go into in this video, which is very suspicious, as it always is. But that's something very real and tangible that they're putting out there now, starting the process of us expecting something like this to transpire in the future. Anyways, the fact that the first QAnon post was on 10/28/17 just blew my mind. I can't believe I missed it. Because additionally, you have all of this 17 stuff going on with Matthew Perry too, where right above it says he died at 4/17, and you have the 10/28 and 17 again. Q is the 17th letter of the alphabet. The 17 minutes between the two towers being struck as that resonates with Donald Trump being the Gemini man moonchild during these eclipses, the 17 minutes, quote unquote, between the actual September 11th event and then his destruction of America as he was injected very literally into the political system. Now you have this association between 10/28/17 in the first year of the eclipse, just a couple months after it, with Matthew Perry's death, which has all of this resonance with Leave the World Behind and the destruction of America as it is depicted in that film through a cyber attack. Speaking of which, I want to get into that a little bit more. First, I want to go over this image that Donald Trump put out as a part of his campaign materials. And this relates to Elon Musk and what he tweeted about 9/11. Where you have this image of Donald Trump next to a flag and this apocalypse horse imagery on the other side of him, where he says, nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing. Now, if you are at the level of someone who thinks that QAnon is actually real, which my heart goes out to you if you actually think it's real and haven't gotten past that yet, my condolences. That's unfortunate, but hey, we've all been there. It's okay. The only reason that I instantaneously knew that QAnon was a LARP was because I had already been paying attention to all of this stuff, and I had already seen years and years go by with David Wilcock telling everyone that mass arrests were coming. It's only a matter of time. It's in the works behind the scenes. Don't worry. We're gonna get them. And I saw that over and over again. So when QAnon came on the scene, and it was essentially the exact same narrative where they were telling people that the mass arrests were coming and they're all working on it behind the scenes and it's a U.S. military operation that Trump is behind to ultimately take all of these people down. Just wait for it. We're going to do it. Immediately I said, oh, they turned David Wilcock's narrative into something for conservative boomers in a more mainstream way. They just changed the marketing of the same idea. But anyway, if you're at that level with this stuff, viewing it from that perspective, you would think it's referring to this idea that nothing can stop what is coming in terms of Donald Trump defeating this system that he always talks about defeating, draining the swamp, the calm before the storm. The storm is coming, right? Nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing. But it's actually much deeper than that. This is subconscious manipulation. This is sorcery. Because if you place Donald Trump in the context of these great American eclipses as the moonchild Gemini man, who is the personification of 9/11, it takes on a whole different meaning that's going past your conscious perception. You're viewing this image of Donald Trump and seeing nothing can stop what is coming, nothing. And you are thinking that and accepting that. You are accepting implicitly by just consuming this propaganda that nothing can stop what they are going to do through Donald Trump. Nothing can stop what they are going to use him and the movement they created off of him. It's very literally sorcery. They're attempting to take your will away with this image and the phrase written on it. Nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing. In other words, there is nothing you can do if you view this without understanding what kind of propaganda it is. You will just accept it when they present it to you. And Elon Musk is doing a similar thing where he says very definitively the groundwork is being laid for something far worse than 9/11, just a matter of time. Again, it's sorcery. It's trying to take your agency from you. In the way that people use neuro-linguistic programming to do that to you in person or through a screen. They can say certain phrases or do certain hand gestures in a way that it tries to manipulate you and control your mind in that moment. Well, this is doing that via a still frame. There's just none of the media attached to it. But that is what is going on here with this image, and I just wanted to point that out. Because it's so obvious what they're doing with it. And speaking of that ritual, it just so happens that on February 29th, 2024, former President Donald Trump went to Eagle Pass, which is where this fake, contrived border dispute was going on between the governor of Texas, who is wholly controlled, and the president of the United States and the federal government, which is wholly controlled by the same people. And they staged this border dispute that was going on there. And going back to prior videos, of course, Eagle Pass, Texas is the first United States city that the April 8th, 2024 eclipse will pass through. Accordingly, that's where they choose to stage the border dispute, even though they could have picked anywhere on that huge border to do it between Mexico and Texas, because that artificial conflict is thematically related to the two great American eclipses and how they relate to the destruction of America. And this event is very symbolic of that ritual destruction. It's very symbolic of the dysfunction and the division that's going on in the country. And then on February 29th, a leap day in a leap year, evoking that idea of Operation Warp Speed, time dilation, time travel, President Trump actually goes to Eagle Pass just a few weeks before the actual eclipse will transpire. This is a very powerful event, symbolically speaking. And as I will go into with the rest of the stories that happened after he visited Eagle Pass, this is a good way to see how they coordinate these types of narratives, where you have a symbolically powerful event scripted into existence, and then they have all the other stuff pile on top of it because the symbolically powerful event amplifies what they can do with everything that comes after it. In this case, Donald Trump is the moonchild that amplifies eclipse energy. And Eagle Pass has all of this eclipse energy surrounding it right now. And it has all of this energy surrounding it in terms of the larger narrative that I was just going into about the ritual destruction of the United States of America. So Donald Trump goes there to speak. And as a result, he will amplify all of the news stories that come right after it. And news stories are just a function of agendas that they're trying to get adopted in various ways, or just things that they're trying to get people to believe, whatever it might be. In other words, that was on February 29th, and then on March 3rd, Sunday, it was announced that the Supreme Court was going to have a decision ready on Monday that might relate to the appeal of the Colorado Supreme Court decision that stated Donald Trump was ineligible to be on their primary ballot due to the insurrection clause in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And indeed, a few days later, on March 4th, it was reported that the United States Supreme Court had unanimously ruled that states like Colorado do not have the ability to bar him or any other federal candidates from the ballot using that clause in the Constitution. Rather, it's something that the United States Congress has to decide. Now, hear me on this. Someone paying attention to the mainstream reporting of events and the timing of all of it would just look at this and say, well, yeah, Tuesday, March 5th is Super Tuesday. There's all these primaries going on across the country. So, of course, Donald Trump was on the campaign trail and he ended up in Texas, a very important state, speaking on February 29th. And then, of course, the Supreme Court issued its ruling on the Monday before Super Tuesday because of all those primaries that are going on and the ambiguity that was in existence with this legal ruling kind of hanging out there and nobody knowing quite what to do. So of course they issued that ruling on Monday. And it's like, yes, there will always be the official version of the events that are very logical and make sense, and you can just brush away any of the other coincidences that surround it. But the fact is, Donald Trump ended up in Eagle Pass, where this eclipse will cross into the United States on April 8th, 2024. And then a couple days later, the Supreme Court of the United States issued this decision that removed any state's ability to challenge his status as a presidential candidate, which gave it more energy in terms of how everyone reacted to it. The people on the other side who can't stand Donald Trump and really don't want anything to do with him because of what they believe went crazy when this decision came down. All of that was amplified by the symbolic energy surrounding it, and it made it a more divisive issue than it might have otherwise had been, given the timing of it all. And this is especially true considering the ties that Donald Trump's movement has to these two eclipses and 9/11, or the ritual destruction of something, right? And all of these stories relate to that. So he is amplifying them when they put them in a certain order, when they script them in a certain way. And then, on the very next day, March 5th, 2024, we have this Facebook and Instagram outage. Now, as they say down in the article, Meta's platforms, including Facebook and Instagram, went down for thousands of users on Tuesday because of what the company called a technical issue, quote unquote. The outage was resolved within around 2 hours. Really no big deal in the grand scheme of things. A couple hours, Meta and all of its platforms were down. And if you're viewing this in a certain way, you could see this as priming for cyber attacks to come, where they're trying to get people used to the idea of these things being commonplace. In other words, we must ask the question, is it a coincidence that Donald Trump visits Eagle Pass on February 29th, 2024? A couple days later, the Supreme Court issues its ruling that allows him to continue his path towards the presidency in 2024. And the next day, we have this internet malfunction on platforms that almost everyone uses in the mainstream population. Also on March 5th, we have Cyberattack forces Canada's Financial Intelligence Agency to take systems offline. Canada's Financial Intelligence Agency, FINTRAC, has announced pulling its corporate systems offline due to a cyber incident that struck over the weekend. Over the last 24 hours, FINTRAC has and continues to manage a cyber incident. The incident does not involve the center's intelligence or classified systems. The nature of the incident has not been disclosed. First, we have Meta's platforms experience this issue. Then we have a story about Canada experiencing a cyber attack. And then also on March 5th, 2024, we have a statement regarding the cyber attack on Change Healthcare that happened a few weeks ago. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is aware that Change Healthcare, a unit of United Health Group, was impacted by a cybersecurity incident in late February. HHS recognizes the impact this attack has had on healthcare operations across the country. HHS's first priority is to help coordinate efforts to avoid disruptions to care throughout the healthcare system. And this is relating to Black Cat affiliate behind Change Healthcare ransomware claims group stole $22 million ransom. The Alf V Black Cat ransomware group appears to have shut down its ransomware as a service operation, indicating there may be an imminent rebrand. It is not unusual for a ransomware group to shut down operations and rebrand after a major attack. And Alf v. Black Cat has form for this. Alf v. Black Cat is believed to be a rebrand of the Black Matter ransomware operation, which was a rebrand of DarkSide. DarkSide was the ransomware group behind the attack on Colonial Pipeline in 2021 that disrupted fuel supplies on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Shortly after the attack, the group lost access to its servers, which they claimed was due to the actions of their hosting company. They also claimed the funds had been transferred from their accounts and suggested they were seized by law enforcement. Black Matter ransomware only lasted for around 4 months before it was shut down, with the group rebranding in February 2022 as Alf v. Black Cat. On March 3, 2024, an affiliate posted a message on Ramp Forum claiming they were responsible for the attack on Change Healthcare. They claimed they were a longtime affiliate of the Alf v. Black Cat operation, had affiliate plus status, and had been scammed out of their share of the $22 million ransom payments. Very interesting, right, that this is allegedly the same group that was behind that Colonial Pipeline hack in 2021. And what I wanted to get to is down here highlighted. While ransomware gangs were already under scrutiny by law enforcement, the attack on Colonial Pipeline was a tipping point for governments worldwide who began prioritizing targeting these cybercrime operations. Go figure that this ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline is when this cybercrime idea really started ramping up, and they really started devoting resources to it. Given what we know historically about the events that lead to something becoming well known and something we all need to pay attention to and worry about. For example, there was an insurrection, quote unquote, at the US Capitol. We need to really start paying attention to these domestic terrorists and do a lot more to combat them. This is very similar in terms of the digital infrastructure. And it really seems to be ramping up because not only do we have this most recent healthcare cyber attack, a couple weeks before that we had the AT&T outage. And these things are all piling up in the average person's mind where they're really starting to notice, man, it doesn't seem like things are staying up like they should be anymore. Things are going down all the time, and I don't remember it being like this. Now my Facebook page doesn't work. What's going on? And here we have from Security Intelligence, Cyberstorm predicted at the 2023 World Economic Forum. According to the Global Cybersecurity Outlook 2023, 93% of cybersecurity leaders and 86% of business leaders think a far-reaching catastrophic cyber event is at least somewhat likely in the next 2 years. Additionally, 43% of organizational leaders think it is likely that a cyber attack will affect their organization severely in the next 2 years. There's a gathering cyber storm, Sadie Creese, a professor of cybersecurity at the University of Oxford, said during an interview at the meeting. This storm is brewing, and it's really hard to anticipate just how bad that will be. What an interesting term to use, a gathering storm, in the context of the QAnon stuff. The storm is coming. The first QAnon post in the thread on 4chan was the calm before the storm. And here we have someone, a professor at Oxford, at the World Economic Forum meetings saying there's a gathering cyber storm. On top of the fact that this movie gets released in America in late 2023 with a plot that centers around a cyber attack just like this, that's a major storm destroying the United States of America in the process, released just a few months before the April 8, 2024 eclipse in the context of the symbolic 9/11 that is Donald Trump, in the relationship of his presidency to these eclipses, and his connection to the term storm. Very interesting. Oh, speaking of the storm and QAnon and this amplification that Donald Trump started symbolically by giving that speech in Eagle Pass on February 29th. Also, a few days ago, I think, there was this professional boxer, Ryan Garcia, who went on Andrew Tate's podcast, show, whatever that clown does. I don't know. But this guy went on his show and stated that he saw little kids being raped in front of him. He said that he was held down. I think he specifically referenced Bohemian Grove, as in it was that kind of thing. He was out in the woods and they held him down and forced him to watch this. Hopefully you can see why this story would break now when it did. During this weekend when all this other stuff was going on, because this is a central premise of QAnon. If you go to the QAnon Wikipedia page, it states, their core belief is that a cabal of satanic, cannibalistic child molesters are operating a global child sex trafficking ring which conspired against Donald Trump. Obviously not a coincidence that Ryan Garcia came out with this story when he did. And this will just be something that we have to follow as it unfolds. It just happened on Twitter today, so there's a lot more that will come out about it, and we'll get a better idea of maybe what is going on with this whole thing. But what I found the most interesting from this screenshots on the internet was the people that are following this boxer, given what he said, we probably already have a good idea why this transpired in the way that it did. Not to say that it's impossible. This wasn't some genuine thing that transpired and he finally came clean about it and wanted to tell everyone. That's possible, but looking at who is following this boxer and given everything else that's going on, it's more likely that this was scripted to come out right now because this amplifies the division. It amplifies the QAnon narrative, which ties into the amplification of the division via politics and the Supreme Court decision. And it's kind of the perfect thing along those lines to add into all of this stuff that is a part of the kind of mini ritual that was Donald Trump speaking at Eagle Pass before this eclipse on April 8, 2024. I don't know what's going to transpire here. Like I said, it just happened. But if it follows the normal pattern, we're going to see the two sides emerge where the Alex Jones Q Trump side of the internet will say, hey, look, this is more proof of what we've been saying. This is great. Somebody's finally coming out and saying something that we've been saying. And then the other side will have all of these stories saying he's been having mental problems, he's been unhinged, he has drug problems, he's been having a rough time, we're worried about Ryan Garcia's mental health, something's been going on with him, and then the mainstream side of it will paint him as that kind of crazy person who shouldn't be listened to, and in that way they discredit the subject at the same time that they discuss it. At the same time that they amplify it for propaganda purposes, they also discredit it. And that's their formula and general modus operandi as it relates to all of this stuff. Maybe I'll end up being wrong about that, but that would be my general intuition if it follows the patterns that these things normally do. Also, it comes out on March 5th, 2024, that Trump has broken his silence on Israel's military campaign in Gaza. Former President Donald Trump declared Tuesday that Israel must finish the problem, quote unquote, in its war against Hamas, his most definitive position on the conflict since the terror group killed 1,200 Israelis and took more than 200 hostages on October 7th. And obviously, going back to all of the Great American Eclipse analysis, we know that East Palestine was a huge part of that narrative, as it would later relate to this thing going on in Israel with Palestine. So again, it makes sense that this part of Donald Trump's resonance with Israel would also be amplified at the same time via the Eagle Pass Eclipse resonance and Donald Trump the Moonchild. Oh, speaking of mind control, I wanted to cover the science of leap year real quick, just because of the fact that Donald Trump had that speech in Eagle Pass on a leap day in a leap year. But it really doesn't relate to him. It's more about the fact that their explanation is by adding an extra day every 4 years, our calendar years stay adjusted to the sidereal year. And this is necessary because there aren't exactly 365 days in a year. And if we don't account for the fractions that we round down on all of these times that are involved here, our calendar will end up being way off. And when you get into this, it really underscores the idea that the calendar is a solar thing. It's based on the solar system and the activity above us. Which is amazing to me because the Bible expressly forbids any kind of divination, and it expressly forbids the practice of astrology. And yet, ordinary people, myself included, follow this calendar and follow the days and look at it in a way that we think it's just something completely normal that doesn't have any association to any of the things I just mentioned. It doesn't have any association to the moon or the stars or the sun or any of that other stuff. This is just the day of the week and the month that we're in. I don't get how it could be anything else. And when you really get into it, it's like, no, this calendar is finely tuned to the celestial events above us. And we are all practicing that whether we know it or not. Just one of the many ways of subconscious warfare being perpetrated against us without our knowledge. It's funny, the Jewish calendar is just straight up a lunar calendar. It's based entirely on the moon. It's like, they at least put that out there in a very obvious way. Hey, our calendar is based on the moon. But for us, it's kind of detached in the way that we view it. And we don't think of it along those lines. As I mentioned earlier, though, it's fascinating. Donald Trump creates Operation Warp Speed during COVID, and he has all of that other resonance to time travel movies, Back to the Future, Donnie Darko, time dilation. And then he gives this speech in Eagle Pass on a leap day in a leap year, kind of maybe hinting at some kind of quantum leap. That this whole ritual surrounding these eclipses is designed to transport America through the dividing pathway through Eagle Pass. Hopefully it makes a little more sense now what I meant by saying that this was a good example of the larger sorcery and the larger ritual from a more granular perspective. Almost like a mini ritual within the larger ritual. And looking at the mini ritual, you can kind of get a better idea of the larger one that I've been going into in all of the Eclipse videos. President Trump speaks at Eagle Pass. On February 29, 2024, the Supreme Court issues its decision on his eligibility to run for president a few days later, amplifying the division that they create through his character and all of the reactions that they drain from people through that division. One side views it as a victory, the other side views it as the worst thing that's ever happened. How do we stop this guy? All of that's going on then in the background as the next day comes and all of this cyber attack stuff is in the news. Again, amplifying that idea through Donald Trump's mini Eagle Pass ritual as it relates to leave the world behind and all of the threads connecting that back into Donald Trump, the Moonchild Gemini Man, and the Ritual Destruction of the United States of America. This movie about a cyber attack that is a part of this window of the April 8th, 2024 eclipse. And the symbolic X that those two eclipses make over the country itself. And in that context, nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing, at least as they relay it to you and all of us. Nothing can stop what is coming, so they say. Which is not true, obviously, but that is how they help people to think without them actually thinking. They think for them. And they disable their ability to imagine something different with subconscious warfare like this. They mean nothing can stop what is coming, nothing in terms of the ritual, the sorcery. Alright, I think that's enough for this one. Later.